for coming out. My name is Kim Barber. I'm the director of the Back to the Bays initiative. And we have our lovely speaker, Kate, here today, who's our aquaculture coordinator for Back to the Bays. So she is going to give you an amazing rundown of what we do in terms of our spat on shell oyster reef restoration and touch on a little bit of what we're doing right here in Sag Harbor. So we're very excited to hear and learn a bit about that. Just a little bit of background on Back to the Bays before we kind of get into it. This is an initiative of Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program. So we have been giving back to the Bays since 1985. So we're a local nonprofit. We do a lot in terms of habitat restoration, shellfish restoration, community and youth education, wonderful events like this. And we really like, through the Back to the Bays initiative, to get people involved in some of these hands-on opportunities. So Kate will explain more as it relates to oyster reef restoration and how you could actually play a role in that, hopefully. Over the next coming year, we have all of these Back to the Bays stewardship sites that we offer. And again, we welcome you to come on board with us. Those stewardship sites that we hold are kind of underwritten by our steward program. So if you didn't already when you came in, we encourage you to sign up as a steward. It's just a $25 donation. And again, it helps underwrite all the great work that we're doing. So that's just my little programming note. I want to thank Rory and our Kids Squid friends here for having us. We did a lecture here last year and it kind of spurred into this wonderful partnership that we have with Kids Squid and the community at large, and now we have a new Back to the Bays stewardship site right in Sag Harbor. So we're doing eelgrass restoration and oyster restoration this year, and we want to evolve into some of the other species that we're working with as well. So it's all good things, and again, these community partnerships are everything, but we appreciate you all coming out and your interest in learning more about what Kate's going to be presenting on. So I will leave it to her, and you will become oyster reef aficionados by the end of her talk. So enjoy, and thank you so much again for coming.
All right, so just quickly, again, my name is Kate Rossi-Snook. I'm the aquaculture coordinator for Back to the Bays initiative as part of Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program. And just briefly, if there, I try to include this information if there's any students in the audience or family members of students. So I have a bachelor's in marine biology from Roger Williams, and I ended up getting a master's in environmental anthropology from University of Maryland because I've always been really interested in the human dimensions of marine restoration. And I specialize in shellfish aquaculture for restoration, for sustaining the harvest, but also for habitat restoration and water quality improvement. I've been doing this in Rhode Island, Delaware, and then moved out to the East End in 2011, and I've served as the East Hampton Town Shellfish Hatchery Manager for 6 years before coming here. And I used to put like more serious photos of myself, but I felt like that was kind of silly. If I'm going to be introducing myself, I might as well really introduce myself. That lower picture, I did a program with my sister, and being the MC, she kind of snuck in this photo of me. It was the moment I knew I wanted to be a marine biologist, getting a kiss by Sniffles the sea lion. And I went from a very charismatic creature to animals that look like rocks. But that really is that human dimension. Like, I care so much about acknowledging that these creatures are not just important for water quality and our ecosystems, but for our cultural traditions out here and our economy. And we need to really acknowledge all of that. So again, CCE Marine Program, we're part of Cornell, Suffolk County. We are affiliated with the university, but we are a nonprofit, like Kim said. And I like to point out, I think it's cool that every county in New York State actually has a CCE office, but Suffolk County is special because it's the only one with the marine program. And one of our longest running programs is our town reseeding program, which I'll highlight the difference with like what we do with Back to the Bays and that, which half of my time is actually in the hatchery producing the shellfish for the town reseeding program. It's enhancement. So we are putting individual oysters, hard clams, and bay scallops out into open harvest waters to keep that harvest going, with the idea of in a few years someone will be able to take them. But Back to the Bays, that's more of like a restoration approach, and really, really hammering in that education aspect that's at the core of our mission. So, and I love this photo. I know that there's a few Shelter Islanders here. That's where I live. Shelter Island was our big new stewardship site last year. And this is Sophie Clark. She's an island resident, many generations long. She's a senior now, graduating, committed to UNH Marine Program. And she's here in Cockles Harbor seeding clams that she helped me grow in the waters that her family has been harvesting clams out of four generations, and that it was really special for her, and just that's what it's all about for me. So in the Back to the Bays initiative, we have a network of stewardship sites, and like I said, we do this restoration work and education work, and what that means is we try to target multiple species restoration, acknowledging that it's important to take an ecosystem approach to everything you do. We're not just going to focus one species and like walk away. You get better results, and you see more success if you, again, take that ecosystem approach. So we start upland with coastal habitat restoration and plantings. We do eelgrass meadow restoration. Sag Harbor Shoals is one of our greatest successes, actually, with eelgrass restoration, and we hope to keep that going and expand possibly to other locations around Sag Harbor. Shellfish seeding, kind of, that's where we go in tandem with the town enhancement program and our restoration. We try to find areas where we could seed hard clams and eelgrass, or bay scallops and eelgrass, because they are water filterers. They help clear the water column, which allows more light to reach the eelgrass. It is a plant, so it needs sunlight, right? So if the water's murky, it's not going to grow as successfully. And then finally, oyster reefs, and that's why we're here. And that picture we use a lot because it's just so perfect. We found it on our Tiana Bayside Shellfish Sanctuary this past field season, and that is actually just about a teeny bit over a year of growth, and they're already full-size adult oysters, and that is exactly the kind of structure that we're looking for an oyster reef. So how do we get there? This is a classic graphic for the life cycle of an oyster. Not just oysters, actually, hard clams and bay scallops, they're all bivalves and they're all broadcast spawners. So they release the eggs and sperm into the water column. Only difference, bay scallops are simultaneous hermaphrodites, so they produce both eggs and sperm, while hard clams and oysters are male or female, although they do switch throughout their lifetime. So they release the eggs and sperm, and they're fertilized in the water column. You have cell division within hours, and then they, for a couple weeks, they exist as this free-swimming larvae, veliger phase. Then they grow a foot, so they become a petty veliger, petty meaning foot. And this is where things differ with oysters. You see in that drawing, there's that little black dot. We call them eyed larvae. It's not an eye, it's just something cute, we call it. It's just that black dot, and that's the sign that we look for in a shellfish hatchery, that we know that they are about to set. So bay scallops, hard clams, they continue to be motile throughout their lives, right? Clams have the foot that they keep, and they can dig into the sand. Bay scallops, they clap and swim. Oysters, once they hit that setting phase, where they land, that's where they land for life. So it's very important to provide them that perfect substrate for them to live forever. And so out in the wild, on an ideal oyster reef, they would settle on another oyster shell and grow and create that structure. So here is a picture. Is that an oyster? No, very good. It's a hard clam. It is a female hard clam broadcasting eggs. So all of that, you can kind of see in that lower corner, like it's a little bit grainy, like tiny, teeny, the grains, they release millions upon millions in a single spawn. Millions upon millions, one clam, or oyster, or bay scallop. Okay, here is a male oyster though. Ready? So there you go. Kind of cool, right? So this is in a controlled setting in the laboratory in our hatchery out in Southold. We are able to determine how much sperm reaches the eggs. You don't want to expose the eggs to too much sperm. You get polyspermy, they're not going to develop right. So it really is a kind of a complex, intense, you have to dedicate your attention to it. Out in the wild, when they're spawning, think about a bay or a harbor. There's so much space for them to just flow around, and you'd think, how could they even possibly have a chance to fertilize? That's why they release millions upon millions of eggs, because the chance is so low of success. So within hours, you have cell division. This is just like classic, take you back to biology class, under the microscope. Each of those like disfigured circles now, that it was a perfect circle as an egg, and now you're getting like the mitosis, meiosis, all of that within hours. The next day, you have free swimming larvae. These are about a week old. This is the veliger stage. These are like toddlers. They're so little. How do they move so fast? It's impossible to keep track of them, trying to count them to get an estimate. But you can see the cilia, the velum. That's how they move around. And this is just under the microscope. But you can see that the darker coloration, that's what you want to see. That means their bellies are full. They're getting enough food. We produce single-celled algae or microalgae in the hatchery, and that's what they prefer to eat. And for scale, this is a liter container with holding that phase suspended in the water. That's probably about just shy of 1 million. Yeah. Like you can just see those little black dots. That's an oyster. So then, 2 weeks old, you start getting the pediveliger stage. So you're going to want to look for that eyed larvae stage, right? Not all of them have it, but you're going to want to look for that black dot. It's kind of cool. You see the foot and the velum. And then you can kind of see, did you see that black dot up there? Yep. Again, you're seeing that nice coloration, full bellies. Is this boring? Do you love this, or should I skip it? I'm like, I can keep looking at it. It's like, right, so it's hard to spot that black dot, but you have to really be careful, like look carefully. There's that lower one. You can kind of just see that black dot. Mm-hmm. So again, for reference, this is them at this stage. The left picture, that's probably 10 or 12 million oysters, all like in that sieve. It's a fine, fine mesh. We call it a catch screen. But just as an example, that's the bottom of the bucket. They were already starting to like set, and you're like, oh, no, 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 no. So commercial hatcheries where oyster farmers would purchase seed, they would grind up oyster shell into a consistency like sand. And the idea is that each one of those dots, each one of those oysters would settle on a grain of that culch, is what we call it. But for the oyster reefs, we want them to settle on whole shell. And this is an example. I'll have some pictures too. I just brought this. Normally they would be bigger. So we collect, very critical step is collecting recycled shell from restaurants and businesses who participate. And we take them to our shell pile. We have a partnership with Sylvester Manor Educational Farm on Shelter Island. And they let us use a back portion of their farmland to dump all this shell. We really collect a lot. This is actually a picture from Cowfish down in Hampton Bays. That was one run. That was after 1 week. It's like a full truck bed of shell. So it's really amazing. All that valuable material, like all that material is incredibly valuable to us, critical for this step, would otherwise be going into the waste stream. And here we are collecting it, utilizing it. It has to sit on the shell pile and cure for 6 to 12 months, ideally 12 months per DEC regulations to make sure, most because of the burgeoning farming industry, which is fantastic, shellfish farming industry, most of the oysters that restaurants out here serve are actually locally grown, which is fantastic. But just in case restaurants are getting oysters from other states, other waters, we need to make sure they sit in the sun, in the rain, in the elements, so there's no risk of introducing any foreign species or diseases or anything. So then, this is actually just from last Friday. I had my first Shelter Island stewardship session. That's at Sylvester Manor Farm, our shell pile. So these have been curing for actually, I think, over a year, well over a year. And so we shovel them into these mesh bags, and we created that one day in an hour, like well over 60 bags. I lost count. So yeah, so these nice dry cured shells are put in the bags, and then we put them in a remote setting tank. This is a smaller setup than what we have at our Southold facility, our main facility, but this is one that I have set up at Shelter Island. We're hoping to get a similar setup down at our Tiana location. Works just as well. You fill it with the shell bags. You see in that lower picture, that tube I'm working with, that's going to be hooked up to an aerator, so the air comes up from the bottom, aerates the water, but also keeps the larvae moving. When it's time, I get the larvae from the hatchery. At that eyed stage, I first fill the tank with a bunch of that microalgae, so that's what gives it that brown color. That is fantastic. It's like a health smoothie for them. And then I top it off with filtered seawater, and I suspend the larvae in there and add it in. How much? That is just like a little coffee filter that I have, that I'm holding up there. Any guesses as to how many larvae that is? No guesses. 2 million. 2 million? Any others? 5 million, about 5 million. Mm-hmm. So I try to aim for 5 million per one of those tanks. It works out, I might be getting ahead of myself, but it works out where now doing a number of the sessions. Once they get to the big enough to be seeded, to that seeding point, and adding onto an oyster reef, we're putting out about 100,000 oysters per one of these small tanks. So it's that's kind of like the formula I've dialed in. After a few days, after I add them, I'll see that water will actually be completely clear after just 3-4 days. And that's when I know that metamorphosis has completed. So they've gone from larvae to juvenile oyster. They've completed setting, and now they're starving. They're like teenagers. And so then I have to just keep a flow through. So I'll do a larger size filter on, let's see that filter bag that I have. That's a fill hook that I have in that upper right hand picture. I'll do a not as fine of a filter, and I'll just have it keep flowing. So they get a constant flow of food. Because one fact that people love to share, how many gallons of water can an adult oyster filter?
50.
So they eat quite a lot, so they need constant food. Nice job. So these are just the stages here. The left side, you can barely see those little specks. Those are our set oysters, probably a couple weeks old. This here in the middle is a few months old. And then we have, probably just shy of a year. It depends on the growing conditions, warm water, they grow faster. So if they're planted, let's say on the reef at the at the end of fall, they're not going to do too much growing over the winter because they filter a lot less, but they grow. They're growing over the summer. So then it's time to plant them on the reef. So these are just some pictures from Shelter Island. I worked with some students at the high school, as well as community members, taking them out of those tanks. We count and measure. That's how I got that estimate. I can keep track of the number of oysters we're putting on, so that when I do my monitoring, I can check survival and see how well they're doing. And it's also, actually, that was not a science class. That was actually a math class that I worked with, because they had a rigorous statistics course to go through. So they actually had hands-on numbers to work with that they then were able to kind of crunch and could kind of bring it to the forefront of their minds of what those numbers meant. And I love that lower picture on Shelter Island. We have a recreational fisherman, just an interested community member. We have a charter boat captain. We have an commercial oyster farmer, and we have that woman on the end, Betty. She's on the Water Quality Improvement Advisory Board for Shelter Island, and she's a retired science professor. So it's like really, I love that these stewardship sessions really bring so many different people together. And we're hoping to do this, we're looking to do this in Sag Harbor this summer. We did already receive Village Board and DEC approval for John Steinbeck Waterfront Park, so we're hoping that we can get like our last approvals from everybody to start that. So keep an eye out, sign up to get emails, sign up to be a steward. You can be notified. You can be one of those people that helps us plant that first pilot reef here in Sag Harbor this summer. We're aiming for the last week of July, first week of August. That's the problem with dealing with living creatures, is It's kind of hard to tell until you're right there in that moment. Oh, and then, so this is the why. Why are we doing this? So we already talked about their filtering abilities, but that structure that I talked about that we were looking for, it's really important for habitat. So this video isn't great that I'm about to show you. On the left is a still photo of like before planting anything. It's just kind of like flat sand, a few rocks. If you were a fish, there's not many places to hide from a predator, right? So now this is actually back on our Tiana sanctuary. This is using an iPhone through a clear window on a dry bag. We're determined this year to get much better footage, so just bear with me here. Okay, so look, oh, they're actively filtering. You see how they're just a little open? Actively filtering. Look at all that structure. There's macroalgae, multiple species. You can't see all the crab species that I saw, but they're there. And then, so this is our colleague Ella taking this video. You're gonna see, she's like trying to capture, so that's the edge of the reef. So it's like barren sand. Oh, and she's like, comes up and she's like, wait, I'm gonna try again. Barren sand, barren sand, edge of the reef. See that difference? Oh, yeah. Great habitat for all sorts of species that are critical for just the health of our ecosystem, but for recreational and commercial fisheries. Okay. And these are the kinds of species that I'm talking about. These are all species that I've brought up from just for events like this. I have a couple cages with spat on shell hanging off bulkhead, so I can bring them up. And these are all the species that I have found hanging out among the spat on shell that are attracted to the oysters, attracted to the structure of the shells. Do we want to do like can anyone identify any of these species? You want to yell out? Just yell out. Yell out.
Blackfish.
Blackfish, yep. Upper left, black sea bass, middle there.
Toadfish.
Oyster toadfish, lower right. What was that?
Pipefish.
The pipefish, center, yep.
It's a mangrove snapper.
Oh, very good. Those are ones that I just started seeing this year. That was like really interesting, and I'll pause you there. One, they're super pretty. They have this beautiful turquoise stripe here. And two, mangrove snapper, right? We don't have any mangroves. Well, warming waters, climate change, they are starting to make their way up. But think about what mangroves look like. Yeah. They offer that intertidal structure so similar to oyster reefs. So they're coming up here with the warming waters and they're like, oh, well, this isn't such a bad home. This is just like my mangroves. So that was really exciting. I really only just started seeing them last year. Middle left. Oh, no. So that lower left, that's grass shrimp, right? So that first we could do the easy one, the middle. Middle? Eel. American eel, very good. Left middle, last one. Oh. Not to. Skillet fish. Skillet fish, and that is also one I hadn't seen until this past year. I had gotten reports that they have been seen among oyster reef restoration work much closer to Manhattan, warmer waters up there. So again, they're starting to kind of come up here. They're very funky. We have a bunch that I just pulled up today in here that I'll try to like rustle up, but they have flat bottoms. They suction down onto the side of the glass or down on the dock, or more importantly, in the cup of an oyster shell. They'll suction down and just like kind of hide out and seek shelter. And I just love this graphic, like for another why. This is all about like the living shoreline. It's on the left, you have that gradual upland marsh. I mean, they are showing an invasive species there, but we'll get to that later. Some nice oyster reefs and eelgrass, and it supports all those fish. That's what we're looking to do here. And again, Sag Harbor 2024, we're looking to continue our eelgrass plantings, hopefully start that oyster reef pilot planting, and then expand actually our living shoreline habitat restoration. We had started that at Long Beach, looking to keep that going, maybe do other locations. And just quickly, these are a bunch of QR codes that all directs to our website, but different specific sections of our website for our events calendar. not just stewardship sessions, but also our artsy events with our resident artists, kids after school activities and camps, and all sorts of things. So check that out. We're always adding stuff. We encourage you to be a Back to the Bays steward. If you do 5 stewardship sessions, you get a t-shirt. And then keep our work going in Sag Harbor, and if you want to contribute to the Stewardship Site Fund. And thank you.